Welcome to the Love Doc Podcast. I am your co-host, Raina Butcher, here with our host, Dr. Sarah Hensley, the owner and CEO of The Dating Decoder, soon to be
the Love Doc Relationship Coaching Services. We're rebranding. The company is the same, just the name is different.
Yes, it's exciting, very exciting. And with that rebranding, just know that lots of new exciting things are coming down the pipeline for all of Dr. Hensley's followers and, of course, all of our listeners here on the podcast. And speaking of the podcast, we want to thank our sponsor, Cozy Earth. Thank you, Cozy Earth, so much for sponsoring this podcast. We love your products. We cannot rave about your products enough.
Obsessed doesn't even feel like a strong enough word. And, you know, it really takes a lot to wow me.
Me too.
Cozy Earth has wowed me because we are easily influenced.
Yes.
But we are also easily, I think, willing to say, oh, this product sucks, right?
Yeah.
And Cozy Earth is the opposite of suck. It is amazing.
It is luxury.
Their sheets and their pajamas, and I even got the comforter made from viscose from bamboo, okay? I don't know how they get it to be so soft, but it is so
The process
soft.
I've heard is pretty complex. I actually looked it up because I was curious.
Oh, interesting.
And it's complex. It was a little over my head.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you about Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth makes sheets that have a 10-year guarantee, which is really, really awesome.
Yeah.
If they pill or you just don't like them, you can send them back. And they are temperature regulated. They are so soft, so luxurious. I cannot say enough about their pajamas. I have now bought multiple pairs of their pajamas, and that is what I wear all weekend long because I just do not want to take them off.
Yeah. And the next purchase will be a lounge set. And if you are looking for the perfect gift for your partner for Valentine's Day, I'm telling you right now, go to cozyearth.com. Put in the promo code LOVEDOC because you'll get 40% off and get your husband or your wife. They have unisex pajamas. Go get them a pair of pajamas, and I promise you it will be one of their favorite things.
Yes, they will love it.
Yep, they'll live in them. Or they have the lounge outfits. That's going to be my next purchase.
Yeah.
So please go visit cozyearth.com.
They have really cute Valentine's Day heart pajamas now, too.
Yes, they do. That's important.
I'm on it.
That's important. Yes, because again, you want to go there and get a great gift for your partner. cozyearth.com, mention this podcast, put in the promo code LOVEDOC, 40% off. That's very generous.
Very generous deal.
Yes. And if you take the post-purchase survey, they will send you a free pair of socks.
And I have those socks and I love them.
Yes. Thank you, Cozy Earth. Okay, episode 38.
Dang.
I know.
That's a lot of episodes we've been blowing
I know.
through.
It'll be a year in May that we've been doing this.
Well,
It's our favorite thing too, guys. Just so y'all know.
we love doing the podcast.
We do.
It's so fun.
It's almost like a counseling session for me. I get to come here and learn things and, talk about some of my own issues. And it's been really cathartic for me. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, of course.
But today we're going to talk about the most painful relationship dynamics.
Yes. The most painful dynamic, with the exception of being in a relationship with a narcissist. That is incredibly painful. Or someone with a personality disorder, okay? Other than that, when we're talking just about attachment dynamics, the fearful avoidant with a dismissive avoidant is absolutely the most painful.
Yeah. And we'll start from the beginning.
Yes.
And Dr. Hensley's going to break it down for you all. One, what does it look like?
Yes. Well, I definitely suggest that listeners go back and listen to the episodes where I describe the fearful avoidant and the episode where I describe the dismissive avoidant because this is probably going to make more sense to you. And some of the information will overlap just so that I can talk about the dynamic, but that will really prep you for this episode. So if you're a new listener, you might want to go back and listen to those episodes, and then this one will make a lot more sense. But a fearful avoidant is someone who has an attachment style that was born out of childhood trauma. And this trauma essentially created a trust break between the child and one or more of their parents. And the way that trust break gets imprinted into the subconscious is essentially this idea that, well, if my parents couldn't be trusted, then no one else would ever be able to be trusted, right? Because our parents are who gives us the foundational information about what it means to be close to someone. And that gets deeply imprinted into the subconscious. That's the basis of attachment theory, because then we take it with us into adulthood and it plays out in our own romantic relationships, right? Because the subconscious is very vulnerable during childhood and adolescence to being imprinted with messages about what it means to be you and what it means to be close to someone. So the fearful avoidant has a huge wound of betrayal. They don't know that they have this, right? This is not conscious where they're going into relationships like, oh, I think everybody's going to betray me.
Right.
It's
And
not
if
how it
you want
works.
to understand the subconscious, there's actually another episode.
There is another episode on that.
Called The Unveiling of the Subconscious that you should also go back and listen
Right,
to.
which-
Just listen to all the episodes. Okay?
Yes, they do build off of each other.
They do.
And so the fearful avoidant has a number of characteristics and traits. They do tend to have what we call high trait variability because they have both an anxious side to their attachment and an avoidant side. So they have the entire attachment spectrum. I call it the grasping at straws attachment. It used to be called disorganized, and that was a really good term. I don't like that they kind of did away with the term because it describes their pattern of relation, which is disorganized,
sense,
right? Sometimes they're anxious and they want connection. Other times they're avoidant and they're pushing people away and isolating. So, and you never know what they're going to do. They're very unpredictable.
Yes.
Unlike the other two insecure styles, which are, in fact, very predictable.
Right.
So we have the deepest need of the fearful avoidant is to be seen, heard, and understood. Fearful avoidants are very hypervigilant because trauma will make you hypervigilant so that you can stay safe. You have to be very tuned in to other people's subtle cues about their behavior, right? And so fearful avoidants are always sort of looking around and taking in micro expressions and subtle details about people's behavior. And that gives them very quick assumptions around whether or not they're going to be hurt or whether they can trust that person. And they also tend to have a very negative bias where they really focus on the negative aspects of their relationship. Again, that's born from trauma. If you focus on the negative, that can keep you safer than focusing on the positive. However, we know that you need to have a balanced view of your relationship, right? The positive things in your relationship matter, not just the negative things, but fearful avoidants get laser focused on the negative aspects of their partner and negative aspects of their relationship, bringing up lots of problems. The fearful avoidant is a very deep feeler. They are very complex people, very dynamic people. It doesn't mean they'll always express those big emotions. A lot of them, when they're in their avoidant space, shut down and they don't express anything. They're either holding it in a flee response or they are dissociating from it in a freeze response. So it doesn't mean that they're always going to express their feelings, but they do feel their feelings very deeply. Okay. And they understand their feelings and they understand other people. They're very, very tuned into others.
High emotional IQ.
Yeah. Very high, EQ. Yeah. And so they do things like bring up a lot of conflict. They criticize their partner a lot. They complain a lot because, again, they're heavily focused on the negative and they're hypervigilant, so they catch all the negative, right? And they can be highly emotionally reactive. For some more avoidant fearfuls, it takes them a lot. They're like holding it in, and then they explode, like the top busting off of a pressure cooker. Or the more anxious fearfuls will fight, and then run out of steam, feeling unseen, not heard, not understood. And then they back away and freeze or dissociate and push their partner away. So you can definitely see that there are more anxious and avoidant sides, right? It's very... It's very person dependent on whether they will act more avoidant than anxious or more anxious than avoidant. So some people essentially lean more anxious, some people lean more avoidant.
And they can spend either or in one of those landscapes per se, like for years at a time. For years,
yeah. One of the things that influences which side of the spectrum they kind of lean to is the spectrum of their partner. So they tend to lean opposite of their partner, which makes relationships so challenging for them. Because if their partner is leaning in and trying to get close, they will run away. If their partner leans out and is creating distance, they will activate and try to connect. So essentially they're never on the same page as their partner, right? They're always just sabotaging their relationship by doing that. Well, then they get into a relationship with the dismissive avoidant. So you have to think about the fearful as being very deep, very complex. people who like to externalize, to process.
Yeah. Like if they're not feeling,
And
they're dying. Like
Yeah.
they're those type of people.
Yeah, like everything is a big deal. They're the drama creators.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, sorry, but they're tons of drama, right? They have to have drama
Yep.
to function.
And they don't know they're doing
They don't
it.
know. No,
Right.
fearful avoidants do not know that they're drama creators. They feel like all of their hurts and complaints are very
Pain is
valid.
just that deep.
Right. Their pain is just that deep and it's very easily triggered too, right? They want someone to almost like be inside of their head and guess every one of their needs and just meet every one of their needs without them having to ask for that.
Right.
Because to them, it's like, well, if I have to ask you for something, then it doesn't count.
Right.
So they almost are dysfunctional at the level of expecting mind reading. Okay. Very hyper attuned to everybody else around them.
Yep.
Okay. Let's contrast that with the dismissive avoidant, which could not be more opposite.
Yep.
The dismissive avoidant wants hyper independence. They always want to create space. They absolutely hate conflict and drama. They will do anything in the world to avoid conflict and drama.
Yep.
They will run away from it every single time.
Yep.
They are very surface level people. They are extremely private people. They generally have used emotional suppression.
Very logical.
So they are not deep feelers.
Right. Logical.
They do not understand their own emotions. They actively suppress them. Therefore, the emotions of others completely dysregulate them, completely overwhelm them, seem foreign to them. They are not in the business of seeing, hearing, and understanding people. In fact, for the dismissive avoidant, if they, one, don't understand why someone is hurt, or two, don't agree that someone should be hurt, they absolutely will not address the conflict. Okay? They'll be like, you don't have a point.
All right.
So I'm not even going to deal with this.
All right.
Right? Like this, whatever you're upset about, that doesn't make sense to me. So I'm not even going to deal with it.
It's a moo point. It's a cow's opinion.
Right, exactly. A moo point?
Only our friends fans.
Yes,
would,
that's a Joey
understand that
line.
reference.
That's a Joey Tribbiani line for sure. Oh, I love that show. Anyhow, so the dismissive avoidant is extremely private. They don't want to be deeply seen. In fact, they want you to see them at arm's length. They want to give the least amount of effort humanly possible. They don't know that they're like that. In their mind, they're giving fine effort. They're doing great.
Yeah.
But they're not. They're way too distant. They very much fear closeness. That is something they do share with the with the fearful. But the fearful fears it because they fear being hurt.
Right.
The dismissive fears it because they fear it's going to take away their independence and autonomy and overwhelm them.
Right.
They also have fears that they just can't meet people's expectations in relationships, right? So we have someone who struggles to meet someone's expectations even when they are blatantly obvious, paired with someone who expects their partner to read their mind.
Right.
We have someone who feels extremely deeply and who wants to externalize and talk about those deep feelings, paired with someone who feels practically nothing and gets overwhelmed by even the mere mention or tone of emotion inside of a relationship. Okay.
You can sense the problems.
Right.
there.
You can sense where this is going to go poorly.
Right.
We have someone who gets very emotionally reactive during conflict, with someone who would essentially rather die than be exposed to heightened emotions.
Right.
Where could where possibly, I should say, could this go wrong?
Right. So
Pretty much everywhere.
I know that this is the dynamic that you see a lot in your practice.
It's the most common relationship dynamic that I see.
So my first question, I think, is just to give people hope. Do and have you seen it work?
All the time.
See?
But they have to make the changes.
Right. Yeah. It's a commitment.
It's a commitment. And I would say for this dynamic, you have less success if only one partner wants to make a change. And dismissive avoidants are wholly resistant to changing. In fact, when you tell them you need to change, they feel attacked, criticized, overwhelmed, and it makes them back away even more because they have a defectiveness wound. And defectiveness wounds are very much activated by criticism.
Right.
Right? So you have one partner, the fearful, who is very critical. It's in their nature to be very critical, to focus on the negative.
Yeah.
And we have somebody whose biggest need in the relationship, the dismissive avoidant, for peace and harmony. That's their deepest need.
Yeah.
Right? One person has the deepest need for peace and harmony. The next one has the deepest need to be seen, heard, and understood. Right?
But you've seen it work.
I have.
When each partner can understand the other's needs.
Yes.
And then actively try to meet them.
Yes. And that where the other's needs inherently disrupt their nervous system. So the fearful avoidance nervous system is very, very dysregulated by the space that the dismissive avoidant needs to process, to understand. And generally, dismissive avoidants create space, and they don't do much of that processing. They don't know how to process their own emotions or to feel their own feelings. So they usually take space, and then in that space, they are doing nothing productive. They're just suppressing and dissociating. And then their goal is to come back when they feel like it can be sort of swept under the rug or enough time has passed where it can just blow over and not have to be addressed. The fearful is like, oh, heck no.
Yeah.
We have to address everything.
Meanwhile, they've been ruminating the entire time.
They've been ruminating in enormous amounts of emotional pain the entire time that the dismissive avoidant is taking space.
Which is building enormous amounts of resentment.
Yes, and anxiety and anger and all of the deep things that the FA feels.
And lots of things that disrupt the nervous system.
So there's this perpetual conflict cycle. The FA, of course, finds a problem because that's what they do is find problems, right? Not that some problems don't exist and aren't legitimate, right? Their criticisms may be valid, but they tend to over-criticize. They tend to find a negative if they can find one. Let's just say that. They present this to the DA in a way, way, way critical way. The criticism immediately activates the defectiveness wound of the dismissive avoidant, and they will get defensive and shut down.
Yeah.
Leaving the fearful avoidant feeling not seen, not heard, and not understood, which is their deepest need.
Yep.
Because that's what they need to feel trust, right?
Yeah.
And so then the dismissive avoidant goes away, shuts down, creates the space. The FA freaks out. Then the FA chases them down again and tries again, only for the same thing to happen. Now, eventually, the fearful avoidant might shut down themselves and give up.
Right.
Because they go into their avoidant side when they feel hopeless. Like, it doesn't matter what I say or do, my partner's just not going to get me, right? They're not going to meet my needs. And the thing that they're usually upset over is the fact that the DA takes too much space, doesn't prioritize them, isn't vulnerable with them, doesn't share the depth of their inner world with them, which is how they feel like they can trust someone, right? We don't just trust somebody we meet off the street or that we know on a surface level. We trust someone that we know deeply. And that's what the fearful avoidant needs. They want to know their partner deeply. But the dismissive avoidant is like, oh my gosh, no, I don't want you to know me deeply. I want those pieces of me to stay private.
Yeah.
You only are allowed to know the surface level things about me, right? And so the dismissive avoidant is so triggered by their criticism. They experience intense shame and defectiveness, which immediately their subconscious goes, nope, we can't cope with that. We have to suppress. So they push it away and they run away from their partner.
Yep.
And then the fearful will chase and demand and beg and plead. And it just is this perpetual cycle.
And I know that like in the early phases of dating with this dynamic that, you know, it can be very confusing, obviously, for the FA. But for the DA, I think it's what makes them disappear, right? Like they'll sometimes ghost or just no explanation.
Yeah.
Just poof, gone.
Yes. So one of the really tricky things about the dismissive avoidant is that in the beginning stages of relationships, they can really go all in. They tend to be a little bit more transparent than just truly vulnerable. Like vulnerability is talking about like your deepest fears,
right,
and your deepest needs. They're more transparent. Like I've been through this or I've been through that. They're not actually really talking about how they feel about it or how they cope with it, right? That's vulnerability versus transparency. But the transparency feels close for the fearful avoidant. In the beginning of relationships, all insecure attachments are attracted to their shadows. And our shadows are our suppressed traits. They're the traits that we don't believe we should share with the world. They're traits that we have developed shame around having. Okay? So the dismissive avoidant was shamed early on and dismissed for their emotional experiences. So for the dismissive avoidant, they carry shame around expressing emotion and receiving emotion. It feels very, very weak, pathetic, shameful, icky, right? But then they meet this partner who for them has not yet triggered their wounds around closeness, commitment, losing their independence. Those are big triggers for them as well. So they do really well at the beginning because in the beginning, the partner is still, quote, low stakes. It's not until they're committed that the partner becomes high stakes, okay? So when the partner is still low stakes, they will be more transparent and they will be more effortful. They will be more attentive. They will prioritize their partner. But then, either after the first conflict or when the relationship starts to take a more serious turn, is when all of their wounding around losing their independence, being trapped, being stuck, having to be vulnerable, having to meet people's expectations start to kick in and they start to deactivate or pull away. Okay? But in the very beginning, they're very enamored by the emotional depth and complexity and the empathy of the fearful. To them, that's just like, those are the traits that I would want to suppress, but I've been associating those things with shame my entire life. Right? So they sort of live vicariously through the FA, experiencing vulnerability, right? The FA's over here being vulnerable, they're being transparent, which can feel kind of like vulnerability, but it's not true vulnerability. The FA is an emotional roller coaster. They are absolutely just an emotional roller coaster on the inside. That's how they live their lives. Their emotions are up and down. They have very high highs and very high lows. The dismissive avoidant suppresses emotions, so their emotional bandwidth is very steady. They're the opposite of an emotional roller coaster. So the fearful avoidant is very deeply attracted to the stability and consistency of emotion from the dismissive avoidant. The dismissive avoidant is cool as a cucumber, man, right? Which is the exact opposite of the internal experience of the fearful avoidant. The fearful avoidant has had like shame essentially associated with, withholding emotion or not being transparent or upfront. They're oversharers. They're overly honest. They feel like they owe people like
lots of
explanations and lots of details, right? They feel like they owe people this information about them. Right? In order to build trust. Because that's what they need from others. So they're sort of like enamored with the fact that the DA just kind of goes about their life cool as a cucumber, stoic. They don't overshare.
They appear to have it very
together, where the fearful really has had a lot of falling apart in their lives, a lot of rebuilding in their lives, a lot of sort of crawling out of holes, starting over, right? And they see this dismissive avoidant that seems to have it all together and they are the man with the plan or the woman with the plan, right? They're not oversharers. And they're like, how do you go through life just not thinking about other people's feelings all the time, right? I think there was actually like, I don't remember where. Oh, it was an episode of, what's that show with Zooey Deschanel? Oh gosh, what's it called?
I'm not sure.
Something about the new girl.
Oh, okay.
And one of the guys says to Zooey Deschanel, so you just walk around caring about other people's feelings all day? And she's like, yes. And she's a total FA on that show. Yeah. And so the FA is looking at the DA like, you don't walk around considering everybody else above yourself? Wow. Like, I feel shame if I prioritize myself over someone else, right? So they're just so enamored with the stability, the emotional control, the non-oversharing and the secrecy or the privacy of the DA. They feel like, wow, like
they're really mysterious.
They're very mysterious and cool, right? They don't word vomit their trauma onto everybody all the time. But then when the feel-good chemicals wear off and when we're not anymore enamored by our shadow traits, we start to crave connection that is like us. We try to want to be loved in ways that feel good to us. And the FA and DA just absolutely, completely miss the mark for each other.
Two totally different
Two completely opposite attachment blueprints.
So what do you suggest in the dating phase? So if they're in the dating phase and they're going through this, I know you've said like run in the past, but say they're like 2 years in.
Okay. So that's long-term relationship.
Yeah. And they want to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I guess this would apply to couples who've been married 2
For sure.
3 years. You know, tell our listeners sort of the steps without giving away all the goods, of course. You have to gatekeep a little
bit. I like to give as much information as I can. But essentially, attachment healing, the basic tools are the same for all attachment styles, but we have to make nuanced ways to use the tools for each attachment style. Okay? So let me give you one really important tool, which is nervous system regulation. Both the fearful and the dismissive have very dysregulated nervous systems. The dismissive is just going into a freeze, which is suppress, dissociate response. And the fearful is usually going into a fight response, which is, irritation, anger, frustration, which is an activating response. So the fearful's response tends to be connection through fighting, whereas the dismissive avoidance nervous system is dysregulated and they want disconnection through isolation.
Right.
So, but at the root, it's still dysregulation.
Right.
Whether you're in a freeze response or a fight response, your nervous systems are not in a sense of felt safety.
Right.
So ultimately, each person has to do the conditioning of their nervous system. They have to use tools to condition their nervous system to pair emotions with safety and to pair in difficult engagement with safety. It's okay to have difficult moments. I'm still safe.
Right.
It's okay that this didn't go well. I'm still safe in this conversation. So we really have to tune into the nervous system regulation piece for both parties.
Right.
But it looks different for the FA and the DA. The FA, when I tell them, where do you feel this in your body? Within 0.2 seconds, they will give me 5 places in their body where they feel their emotion.
Right.
Right? It's in my chest. It's in my stomach. It's in my throat. It's in my hands are shaking. My face is hot.
Right.
They have very strong somatic sensations, which is the key to being able to learn to regulate, is to being tuned into physiology, as well as challenging the stories around the physiology, which is the cognitive piece of emotion.
Yep.
DAs can sit there and go, I feel nothing. I feel absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
I feel it nowhere in my body. So you have to realize that fight is a level 1 trauma response, which is a sympathetic activation of the nervous system, whereas freeze is level 2. Freeze is essentially saying, my emotions are so painful that if I experience them, I will die. So I have to dissociate. I have to disconnect the cord between myself and my emotion. Right? So the dismissive avoidance, like, what the heck do I do? I can't feel anything. And what they have to do, if you look at polyvagal theory and you look at the way polyvagal theory is actually mapped out, when we go through these elevations of dysregulation, it happens on a curve. So you have to go through fight or flight to get to freeze. And you can't get out of freeze unless you come back down through fight or flight. So you can either roll back down the hill or you can go completely over the hump. But either way, you got to come back down through fight or flight. So what dismissive avoidants have to do is they have to really focus on, one, bringing up the emotional stimulus in their mind. So focus on that fight. What was said, right? What were their points? Bring it up and hold it in your mind. If you have to look at pictures, if you have to play music, whatever stimuli, whatever stimuli you need to bring this into full conscious experience, you have to do. The FA doesn't have to do that. It's already running all over them, right? They've already ruminated over it for hours, right?
They've laid in bed at night, up all night thinking about it.
Exactly. So the DA has to actively breathe. We use diaphragmatic breathing and certain specific types of diaphragmatic breathing to send safety signals to the nervous system, which start to bring them down the curve. So they actually have to sit longer with the stimuli, sending safety signals before they will get an ounce of feeling within the body. And sometimes it takes numerous occasions of practice before the DA can feel the slightest hint of emotion in their body.
What are some of the reactions? Because I'm curious. What are some of the reactions you've seen when you've seen DAs like start feeling?
Complete and total shock.
Yeah, tears. Yeah.
Confusion.
Totally new
but
sensation.
Also some relief.
Yeah.
Because you have to realize that emotion is energy in motion.
Right.
That's what it is.
Yep.
And energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Those are the laws of physics. We can only move it around.
Yep.
right? And so you have to think about a DA has had that energy in a locked box that is still stealing from the body and the mind.
Yeah.
So dismissive avoidants are at much higher risk of heart attack and stroke and autoimmunity and all sorts of stuff because the energy is sitting there stealing from the immune system, stealing from the heart, stealing energy from the brain, from the liver, from the kidneys, right? Energy has to continue to be produced. We can't destroy it.
Yeah.
So it's going to maintain itself somehow, right? It's going to stay alive somehow.
Yeah.
But when we process it through, we can move it out. But that actually, both the fearful and the dismissive do not know how to process emotion.
Yeah.
Most people don't.
Yeah.
In a way where the brain can go, okay, we've taken the lesson, we've integrated that into our psyche, we've accepted it, and now we can essentially, that emotion will move out of the body. Isn't that interesting?
It is.
I think so.
And beautiful.
And so I've had dismissive avoidants, numerous dismissive avoidants come to me and said, oh my gosh, I haven't cried in 30 years. And I had tears and it was so foreign to me. I didn't know what to do with it. And most of them actually report they get scared.
Yeah.
And
'Cause
so
it's a
then,
totally
and
new
then they
sensation.
feel the suppression start to kick back in. They feel that like really deep urge to shove it down and pour into something else.
Yeah.
So what we have to do with the dismissives is we have to do exactly what Dana Dawsey said when she was on here, which is microdose your emotional experience. It's like, let's feel it for 30 seconds. And then it's okay to go back to compartmentalizing. But great job. You felt it for 30 seconds.
Right.
You showed your brain you tolerated it for 30 seconds. And you sent safety signals to the brain as you were feeling it. That's really, really, really key.
Yeah.
And that's a piece that so many people are missing, which is attaching neuroregulation and safety signaling with emotional processing. I've said that before. So they get freaked out. And that's why we have to microdose it. Like, okay, can you do it for 30 seconds? And then next time, can you do it for 45? And then maybe the next time you can do it for a whole minute. And then maybe we work up to even 5 minutes
Yeah.
of feeling your own emotions. And for them, that might be plenty of time of feeling, right? They're very slow emotional processors. Even when they do feel it, they struggle to know, what does this mean?
Right.
So the DA has like a broad overview of emotion. It's like happy, sad, mad. That's their spectrum,
Yeah.
right? They're like, I know I'm if I'm in one of 3
Yeah.
phases of like happy, sad, or mad.
Right.
The fearful's like, I could be disappointed, rejected, insignificant, despondent. Like they could just
Go on and on and
go
on.
on and on and on of these very nitty gritty details of their emotional experiences. The dismissive, not so much. And what you have to do when you really learn to cultivate a deep sense of safety in the nervous system, that will stick around, right? The goal is to change your baseline, and the goal is to be able to bring yourself into safety at will. It's not always easy, but we can condition our brains to sort of make safety our home base, the state in which we live most of the time. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
But for insecure attachments, they've lived in these dysregulated states since they were children.
It's not something we're ever taught. Nor
Right.
is it something that people are really prescribing.
No,
Right.
no. We're prescribing drugs. We're not prescribing
How to
healthy emotional
Right.
processing and nervous system regulation, which is, we really need to get this information out there because it's life-changing.
It is. Yeah.
So life-changing.
And homeopathic, right? So
Yeah,
there's no medication.
There's no side
necessary.
effects. There's no side effects, right?
Only joy and peace.
Now, I will give the caveat that if you've had significant trauma, there's a small percentage of DAs that have had such significant trauma so early on in childhood that they had to suppress, and bringing up that trauma could lead to some negative side effects because they just don't have the processing skills. If that is you, go get a good trauma therapist to do this with.
Right.
The FA, they've been feeling their trauma since they had the trauma. You know, they have maybe intermittently are compartmentalizing it to survive, but again, it's intermittent.
Right.
The DA can compartmentalize forever, on and on and on and on and on. The FA has limited compartmentalization ability, meaning they can compartmentalize until that box feels like it's so full, it just bursts open.
Right.
Right? So they just don't have this prolonged compartmentalization ability that the DA does have. So they're very used to feeling their trauma,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I suggest they get a trauma therapist too.
Sure.
I think trauma therapy is a great adjunct. It fundamentally does different things than coaching will do, different strategies, different end goals. But, you know, I would also just say to the FA, we know you have had trauma, so maybe go find a trauma therapist too.
Right.
That accepts insurance.
Do you have clients that you've seen maybe do both, right? Where they see a trauma therapist while getting coaching from you
Absolutely.
as well.
And in fact, people with severe, what we call big T traumas, I definitely highly recommend it.
Yeah.
I say, I would love to work with you. We can make so much progress. But because the trauma that you've had, I mean, we're talking about like sexual abuse
Right.
or severe physical abuse or, you know, complete abandonment and living in a foster home, like those types of things, those types of big T traumas. Just get support because I can't sit next to you. I'm virtual. Right. So go find somebody that can sit next to you and monitor your reactions and responses.
Yeah.
But in terms of coaching therapy is much more exploratory. It's much more hand holding. It's much more comforting and validating, where coaching is like, here are your patterns and here are the strategies, the prescriptive direct strategies to change those patterns.
Yep.
Right? Which does include feeling your feelings.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're a first-time feeler and you've had a lot of trauma,
It might be really difficult.
Right? So I do give that caveat that I can't come to you and sit next to you. We're working over the computer. Right? And I'm not a therapist. I'm a coach. Do I understand a whole lot of clinical skills? Yes. But I'm not giving you those.
Right.
I'm giving you strategies to regulate your nervous system, which is no different than meditation or whatever. But the emotional processing piece, to protect myself like with liability and to serve my clients the best, I do recommend trauma therapy as an adjunct to coaching.
Yeah.
But the two work so well together. And I think that that's what's important to highlight.
And you described that so well. I was actually on a call the other day and someone was asking, you know, that question, what the biggest difference between therapy and coaching was. I did my best, but
yes, therapy is very exploratory, meaning you do most of the talking and you uncover a lot through your own processing and talking. And the therapist is a guide to that, right? The therapist is very, very concerned with making sure you're sort of held gently.
Right.
They're going to be a lot more gentle. They're going to be a lot more focused on you making your own discoveries. But for somebody like the dismissive avoidant who's in a constant state of suppression and who, when you ask them to reveal, inherently become dysregulated from that very circumstance, they don't do well in therapy. They do horrible in therapy. Horrible. In fact, I cannot count how many times I have had somebody that is a partner of a DA say, well, my DA partner went to therapy and it got worse.
Yeah.
Because the therapist is not focusing on their emotional suppression and their actual avoidance. They're just validating everything that the avoidant is saying, like, oh, you have a right. Of course you would want to isolate over that.
Right.
Except that they fail to reveal that isolation is always their pattern over everything emotional or close or vulnerable in a relationship, right?
Yeah.
That's what they fail to mention to the therapist because they don't see it. They don't notice it, except maybe in little bits.
Yeah. It makes sense.
So they do so much better with coaching. They just do because I don't force them to be vulnerable. I give them the steps to process what's in there.
Right.
But I don't force them to tell me what their process is.
And you're giving them actionable steps. And like I said in the beginning, like they tend to be very logical.
And they want prescription. They want step 1, do this, step 2, do that. That is how their brains function. Their brains are hyper logical. They intellectualize instead of feeling their real feelings. So they're very used to trying to think their way out of problems.
Yeah. So obviously, if you're an FA or whether you're a DA, and you're in this dynamic, which we've stated is painful, the most important point is that there's hope.
There is hope. I mean, the FA can totally learn to self-regulate better, to become more emotionally regulated, to minimize their reactivity. They can learn non-critical communication, which is essential for the DA to feel safe. They can learn to tolerate some space while also holding boundaries around things being repaired inside of their relationship. The DA can learn to start to feel their own feelings, therefore tolerate other people's emotions and stay engaged in difficult conversations, therefore staying engaged in the repair process. They can learn to communicate their needs for space a little bit better so that their partner isn't just feeling abandoned, but understands that the space is critical for them to be able to process what's going on. So much can happen.
Right.
And I have seen hundreds and hundreds of FADA couples completely dramatically change their relationship.
Yeah, that's
and
what I was just telling somebody yesterday.
But without the right intervention, I mean, they usually tank in therapy.
Yeah.
It's the dynamic where therapy makes things worse. And I hate to say that. I don't want to
no, because you
dog therapy.
Right, you're not dogging therapy. You're just saying that there's certain interventions that are better for specific situations. And in this specific dynamic, in this specific situation, FADA,
Yeah.
the coaching is just a better intervention for it.
It is a better intervention for it. And for the DA specifically, I know I said, yeah, they might need a trauma therapist, but being exposed to some coaching first and them coming on board with the idea that they need to feel their feelings
Right.
is so very important before they go try to do it.
Right.
Right? Because they will skirt around it in therapy. They will intellectualize it. They won't, therapists.
There's just no consciousness around it. They're not
That's
even recognizing
right.
it.
And so they're not giving the information to the therapist that the therapist needs. They're not the therapist is often not seeing this as an attachment issue.
Right.
And so then therefore they don't get the prescriptive help that they need.
So if you're living in this dynamic, whether you're the DA or the FA, please go visit Dr. Hensley's website, thedatingdecoder.com. Her services include one-on-ones,
Yep.
her hybrid group coaching program, which is probably your most popular.
It is, definitely. It's the fast track to healing.
Yes. And then, of course, her executive coaching program, which is her most exclusive program. But please go check those out. While you're there, check out Coach Elizabeth.
Coach Elizabeth is awesome too.
Yes, who also does one-on-ones. And we are about to introduce her to the hybrid group coaching program.
Yeah, she is going to start doing some groups as well because the demand is so high.
The demand is high.
I can't personally meet the demand by myself. So
Which
we
is
are bringing
awesome.
Coach Elizabeth on, and she is very well trained.
Yes.
She is an
She has
excellent
a high
resource.
return rate. People
Very
love
high
her.
return rate. Very knowledgeable. She has a master's in counseling. She had a attachment framework before she even came to me. So that was the lens by which she was trained. And she uses my curriculum.
Right.
She uses my coaching curriculum that I created. So she is as close of a proxy to me as you can get, but at a much more affordable price. Because, listen, guys, I'm the CEO. I have very, very limited spots available.
Yeah.
So I have to make coaching a higher price to make it worth my while, right, in terms of revenue.
Again, we're one, scaling a business. Two, you're exchanging time for money.
Yeah.
And so where time becomes more in demand, it's business 101. Okay. So we're not trying to offend anyone or
With my prices, right. I mean, and
we
the
realize
fact,
they're not for everybody.
right. And that's why we have Coach Elizabeth, because she has a completely different price point
Yeah,
than
that's
me.
why we have Coach Elizabeth, and that's why the hybrid group coaching program
It's a good
exists.
value.
Because obviously the overall goal here for Doc is that to reach as many people as you
That's
possibly
right.
can.
That's right. And there's only 8 hours in a day. And if I
Right.
only did individual coaching or couples coaching, so individual means one person or a couple, okay?
Right.
But it's one-on-one, meaning it's me just with you guys or me just with you.
Right.
There's no other participants.
Right.
And in my group program, you can be anonymous, and
Yeah.
people need to know that, okay?
Yeah.
People hear group and they're like, oh, I don't want to do
no,
that.
yeah.
You can be completely anonymous. There's functions to be a blank screen and to only private chat.
Yep.
Right? So you don't have to worry about the anonymity issue if that was an issue for you. But I am trying to reach people, and I want to reach 90 people in a day instead of 8 people in a day, because
Exactly.
God has put me on a mission to teach people how to love and to teach people directly or indirectly about his love as well. I mean,
That's right. That's right. So please, again, go to Dr. Hensley's website, thedatingdecoder.com. We have a special promo code just for our listeners, which is LoveDoc27. You can use that at checkout for the group or her course, and it will give you 27% off.
that's huge. That's
Very
the biggest discount I give.
Yes, it is. And it's specifically for you because we
Yes,
love you
because
so much.
we love you and we appreciate you
We
so
love
much.
each and every one of you so much.
Absolutely.
So please go visit her again. And until next time, peace, love, and perspective.